Why do you think that was important? Because we never had the TV on whilst we were eating, which would kind of be the equivalent to an iPad now.
Well, it's because you didn't let us. That's probably the main.
When you were out, we did, didn't we, Dad?
What?
Yes, when Principal Lisa was out, we would take advantage of that and definitely have TV cakes, TV ice cream, TV popcorn, TV dinners.
Oh, no.
Yes, unfortunately, the truth has come out.
Happy Families, coming soon, exclusively on 102 Pearl FM.
The number one fun station in the UAE.
Hi, welcome to the show. Welcome to Happy Families with Principal Lisa. You're listening to 102 Pearl FM, the number one fun station in the UAE. Today I'm joined by some fantastic families who've come to share their experiences, their hopes, the challenges, and just general family life. But what's the unique feature about these families is that all of their children have Down syndrome. So I'm joined in the studio by three mums. One of the mums from the Hope Centre, one mum who runs a wonderful website and support group called I Am Me and the Mindful Pod. So we will be chatting to them again in a moment, and we'll find out a little bit more from them. So keep it on Pearl 102 FM, the number one fun station in the UAE.
When we have dinner, we sit down, everything's sort of in the middle of the table, and we make an effort to make conversation, talk about our day. We don't have our phones or, iPads or anything at the table. It's a really nice time, to come together and share your experiences of the day. And I'm going to instill that when I have children, because I think it's really important, and it really brought us together as a family.
Happy Families, coming soon, exclusively on 102 Pearl FM.
The number one fun station in the UAE.
Hi, welcome back. You're listening to Happy Families with Principal Lisa. I'm Lisa, and I'm going to be with you for the next hour. But I'm joined in the studio today by some very special families who've joined me to discuss happy family life and the challenges and the hopes and dreams around having a child with Down syndrome in Dubai. So welcome to the show, ladies. Thanks for joining me. And thanks for keeping me company at home. So I'm joined today by Steph. Now, Steph has a little girl called Ruby, who's almost 13, I hear.
Yes, that's right.
So thanks for joining us. And we have Nisha, and Nisha has a little boy who's 8.
That's right, yeah.
And then I'm also joined by our friends at the Hope Centre, Amal, who's a mummy I know very well, as we have her daughter in our nursery school. But Amal runs the very special Hope Centre. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
So, Steph, can I start with you? So, for families listening to the show today, what kind of information could you give to someone so that they could understand what Down syndrome is and how it might impact a family?
Okay, so Down syndrome is a genetic condition. It's not a disease. And it's a condition where the child has an extra chromosome. So we like to call that something extra special.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so basically the extra chromosome can affect the children in many different ways, physically, cognitively, and basically it's different depending on each individual child. So, my daughter Ruby may have different challenges to Nisha's son, to Dhruv. But because they're individuals, and that's probably the number one takeaway that I would give is that, even though a child has Down syndrome, the main thing to remember is that they're still an individual, and that you won't know necessarily what those challenges are until you get to that road.
That's right, because, in all cases, when we're talking about children, is that each child is unique. And Amal, who's with us today, she has a child with cerebral palsy, and all children with cerebral palsy are completely unique. So would you echo what Steph is saying?
Yes, I would definitely 100% agree. And I wish what the world would understand is before having this condition, they're just children and they have their own personality, their own needs, their own wants, plus the extra challenges, whether it's a Down syndrome or cerebral palsy diagnosis, they are still who they are.
So what we can understand is that children who have Down syndrome, that extra chromosome, correct me if I'm wrong, is called trisomy 21?
Yes, it is. But there are 3 different types of Down syndrome. So that's the first thing. And my son has the most common, which is trisomy 21. So it's just an extra chromosome on on the gene group of 21.
Okay. And so what kind of challenges would a family experience when finding out that their child has Down syndrome? What's next for them?
And it actually depends on when you found out. So whether it's during the pregnancy or before, whether you have a heads up. I didn't. I found out at birth. So for me, it was scrambling around for information, and you're in no shape or form. It's an emotional challenge. It's pretty difficult. And then you have to just think about what's best. And at the end of the day, it's a child. So it doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be big. It's a baby. Just handle the baby first.
I actually played our teachers in our school at the beginning of the school year this year a video of a young girl in America, and she talks to the teachers about what they need to know, what you need to know. She's quite sassy, this girl, and she says, what you need to know about me as someone with Down syndrome. One of the biggest things she starts saying is, it's just an extra chromosome, like that. She's got so much sass, this girl, and she says, I'm actually a catwalk model, and she's just full of just energy and what she really talks about is, she says to the teachers, and I played it to my teachers, is don't limit me. Don't have this preconceived idea about what I can do, what I might want to do, because you can't imagine what it is I want to do. What would you say to that, Steph?
Yeah, I believe, again, it comes back to the individual, and I believe that all of our children have a voice. And I feel that, now Ruby's coming into the age of 13, that she's starting to develop her own voice. I mean, if you look at, in terms of her development, I mean, she spoke at a much later age, and she also had challenges with the clarity of her speech and still struggles a bit with that. But now she's getting to a point where that voice is becoming clearer and clearer. And I think, I think the most important job that I have right now is to enable her voice to develop authentically as her own, and to allow her to express. It's not always ideally what her voice at the moment at 13 is all over the place, you can imagine.
Well, it's going to be like any other girl of 13,
it's exactly
isn't it?
Like any other child going through puberty. And, and at the moment, it's a bit like that. It's sort of like, it's no different to my elder daughter who's turning 18. She went through exactly the same thing. Yeah. Just a little bit askew, a little bit different, but...
And at 13, I now I'm principal of a nursery in which all our children are under 5. But in my previous life, I've taught in secondary school, and we've had in our school, lots of children with Down syndrome, over the years. And it's exactly the same kind of teenage issues, except that it does bring an extra challenge, because in many ways they can often be a little vulnerable as well at the same time. So yes, you're dealing with your standard teenage issues that we all know and love as mums. I've got 3 children, who are, relatively grown up now, but it did bring an extra challenge. I mean, what would you say to that, Steph? Do you feel that there is an element of that for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of things that I probably can't discuss exactly on air, but things that are happening with her body that I'm trying to get her to understand, things that are not socially acceptable. Probably one example I can give is that she stripped herself naked in the park recently, and and her body is developed, and it's like when you're a young child, I mean, kids do that and people just kind of go, well, it's another child. But when you strip down, you have a body of a woman developing. It's very important. And again, that element of vulnerability of I need to teach her that that's your body and those are your private parts, and we keep them covered, and that's only for you. And so really trying to reinforce that at the moment. Whereas I love that she has no boundaries. And if we lived in another,
yes, in another, perhaps a different kind of country, perhaps.
But even then, you would still enforce those values of, protection for the child and for, privacy, and modesty as well. I mean,
so it's about for you, and before we go to a break, it's about as a mother of a teenager with Down syndrome, is you really, really want her to have that voice to kind of find her own self, but at the same time trying to put in some safety kind of boundaries, there as well. But we talked off air about both your children are doing really, really well at school, and that they're in mainstream settings. I think this is really important. Nisha, how important do you think it is that children are included in mainstream schools when they have Down syndrome?
It's absolutely essential. My son, he had the benefit of going to all types of schools here. We did a mainstream nursery, and then we did the Rashid Centre, which was absolutely brilliant. And that's where I found that academically he could do really well. But unfortunately, socially, he wasn't adapting well. And that's probably because a lot of the children in his class were non-verbal. So although he was learning, he wasn't really communicating.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then we put him into the school that he's in now, JPS, and they're really good. The SEN unit understand the diagnosis, understand my child, his needs are met. And he's included in everything. So, and that's all I want. I want them to just treat him as another child with a few extra things that they need to work on. Yeah. That's all it is.
I think we'll just end on that point before we go to a break. And when we come back, I'd like us to talk about what inclusivity looks like. How do we make sure that happens, and what impact that has on the other children in the class, and why inclusive education is important for all children, not just for the children who have the extra need. So keep it at 102 Pearl FM, the number one fun station in the UAE, and we'll be right back with you. Just tell us, so what time are you getting up now?
So I get up at 4:30 every day. So 4:45 I go out. I walk for 2.5, 3 Ks every morning. As I mentioned, my wife's a teacher, so she leaves early. So by the time I'm back, we sort of cross over, then get the lunches ready, I get the school bags ready, I get the kids up, and I'm in the car by 6:30. I'm by no means a superstar. There's hundreds of parents around Dubai that are doing.
Well done, Sam.
Happy Families, coming soon, exclusively on 102 Pearl FM.
The number one fun station in the UAE.
Hi, welcome back. You're listening to Happy Families with Principal Lisa. I'm Lisa, and we're joined on the show by some families here to discuss Down syndrome and family life. It's great to have you with us. So here in the studio today, we have Steph, Nisha, and Amal. But just during the break, we were also joined by Matap, who's come to join us. And she has a little girl called Ella, who I know very well in the nursery. So very much welcome to you to coming along and popping by and to join us today.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
Oh, could you tell us a little bit about Ella and how old she is, and anything else you can kind of bring alive the story of Ella for us today?
Sure. So Ella, she is almost 3 years old. Ella was born with Down syndrome. Yes, Ella, she actually was born in Denmark. So we moved to Dubai from Denmark back in August. So her first almost 2 years was actually in Denmark.
And that's why I thought it was really important to bring you on the show, and also for us all to connect on this important issue. But how would you say that life has been different for you compared to Denmark and Dubai?
It has actually been quite overwhelming for us, because the way that people actually opened their arms to us here in Dubai, and especially with all the support and help we got both from Kangaroo Kids nursery and from the Hope Center, it has just been amazing. Unfortunately, I must say that we didn't get this support or help from either the doctors or any other, therapist support in Denmark, or the government, just to name a few. But here, even the doctors, they have been so helpful and have supported us a lot with Ella, and tried to give us the right direction to how we can give her the best support. Only positive.
I mean, we've seen a great deal of progress in the nursery. I know Ella quite well, and I mean, extraordinary. She's really, really flourished, and I think that's been a part because she's been in our kind of very much inclusive environment. And we were just talking about that in the break, and we were talking about, obviously, all of us here understand the value of the children who have Down syndrome being a part of an inclusive school, but how important do we think it is, ladies, for the other children in that environment to also be a part of a school where children can come regardless of their need? What do you think about that? Is that something that's different in Denmark, would you say?
In Denmark, unfortunately, the system is like you actually encourage families to get an abortion if they find out that your little child has Down syndrome, which I think is unfortunate because you actually give the society the signal that these kids or these individuals are not welcomed actually into the society, and that of course reflects on the whole chain of like nurseries, schools,
and reflects on how you feel and how supported that you feel.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not a secret. I didn't know that Ella had Down syndrome before she got born, and we actually didn't know the first week. Almost 2 weeks actually. They took a genetic test of her, a blood test actually, because they had a suspicion, the fact that she was a little bit hypermobile, but they didn't see any other signs on her, and she was healthy and nothing, she was perfectly normal. You can say she's still perfectly normal.
Well, she's perfectly Ella, isn't she? How is she progressing? How is she progressing now? What are Ella's favourite things to do?
So she loves music. She loves to dance, and we just found out actually after she joined Kangaroo Kids is that she actually loves painting.
Well, there you are.
Yes, and the way she actually takes this pencil or pen in her hand, and the way she draws, and the way it's just amazing to see. And not only that, she has always also, with the support from Hope Sander, actually managed to get more involved socially. She actually have some sign languages she's actually not communicating with, which she didn't have before. So I would say the progress Ella has had for the past 6 months, she hasn't had that for the first 2 years in her life.
So coming to Dubai has been a really important step for you.
Oh, absolutely. And also the thing is that before we decided to move to Dubai, it's very important for me to highlight this, is that we come from Denmark where there is social security. And we had an amazing life in Denmark. We had our own house. We actually built it from scratch. My husband, he's a dentist. Myself, I'm a lawyer. We had a good career, good jobs. We had 2 cars. We had everything.
It's all sounding really great.
Really nice, really great. But the fact that you have all this and you can still not get help and support from a country that actually has these kind of so-called social security services, that's just has been a huge shock.
It's been amazing to have that journey, to see her just really, really flourish. And I'm just so glad, that we got to support you in that journey. It's
absolutely.
Fantastic.
And she's so happy all the time. I mean, Ella, she went to nursery in Denmark too. But the way they treated her by, because she's not engaging the same way as all other kids, and they didn't give her the support, she would actually sit in almost in a corner by herself until we would come and pick her up.
Oh, goodness me. Can I just bring in Amal? And I know, actually, bless her, Amal's feeling quite emotional listening to this story. Amal is a mummy who, for our listeners at home, she is a child with cerebral palsy, but she is the owner and the angel of the Hope Centre, who supports so many families that I know. Why do you think inclusivity, so children being a part of mainstream nurseries and schools, is so important?
It is so important because actually takes them outside the boundaries that we put for them. For me, my child has mobility issues, and it's very different than what you face with Down syndrome. So she's being put in a frame that she cannot do anything. We have tried several places before we went to Kangaroo Kids, and she was only being put in the corner on her push chair because as peer teachers, she cannot do anything. And she would look at the children while they would play. She would signal that she wants to join, but she wouldn't because she cannot. And inclusion is my question. It was her last day in that place when I said, what about what she can do?
But that's it, isn't it? Is we really focus on what children can't do rather than focus on what children, can do. And I think that's whether you have a child of average ability or challenging ability. But recently a mummy said to me that I was showing on a tour, she said, well, what do you say to the children when they ask you what's wrong with the other children? I said, well, first of all, they don't. And I think that that's important. Actually children are very, very accepting of each other. They just understand difference. I think that it's us sometimes as adults that don't always appreciate difference. Steph, can I come over to you? And because you've been a big part in perhaps bringing people together in Dubai. So what could you tell us about the work that you do, and perhaps also why inclusion is important to you?
Probably the best place to start is my daughter Ruby was born in Abu Dhabi, and we left the UAE for 3 years, where my husband's from New Zealand and we went to New Zealand. So she started her mainstream education journey in New Zealand, which is very inclusive and probably one of the most inclusive countries in the world. They're very good at getting it right. So we moved back to Dubai, and upon moving back to Dubai, I faced 40 plus rejections trying to get her into school. So this was 7 years ago. And because of that, it just was, I think for some people they might, this isn't a rare story. That's what I probably want to get at, is that I'm not the only person that's experienced that. But I'm also a person that, there was no way that she was going to be sitting at home with me. So as in, this child deserves to go to mainstream school, and she just was in mainstream school, and we can do this. So because of that, I created a campaign at that time called I Am Me, which stands for Most Extraordinary. And I was basically trying to use, I'm a photographer as well, and I was trying to use, photographs of her just, on Facebook, just to get that awareness out there. And as a result of that, I've had a few opportunities to be part of the Parent Voice for the Inclusion Framework last year.
Oh, wow, fantastic work.
Well, I think there's so many parents we're all the same. We're all just trying. And what's really interesting is we're not asking for above or beyond. We're just asking for the same. And I for one, refuse to take no for an answer, in that my daughter deserves to be in that school. She deserves, now that she's in the school, she deserves to have adapted curriculum. So that's the path I'm on now, is following to ensure that those curriculums are being adapted for her needs. She's in high school now. She's not able to absorb those curriculums in the same ways as the other children. So she needs alternate pathways. And that is now, this is where we're at now, is working towards that.
Your story is just so inspiring, for any mum listening to the show, or, any dad or anybody listening. It's about, you felt absolutely convinced about what your child needed, and you set about making sure that you could give that to her. That's so inspirational. Now, we're just going to take a break for a moment, so stay tuned. Keep it at 102 Pearl FM, the #1 fun station in the UAE. You're listening to Happy Families with Principal Lisa. Why do you think that was important? Because we never had the TV on whilst we were eating, which would kind of be the equivalent to an iPad now.
Well, it's because you didn't let us. That's probably
When you were out, we did, didn't we, Dad?
What?
Yes, when Principal Lisa was out, we would take advantage of that and definitely have TV cakes, TV ice cream, TV popcorn, TV dinners.
Oh, no.
Yes, unfortunately, the truth has come out.
Happy Families, coming soon, exclusively on 102 Pearl FM.
The number one fun station in the UAE.
Hi, welcome back. You're listening to Happy Families with Principal Lisa. 102 Pearl FM, the number one fun station in the UAE. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We can hardly contain our kind of connection and enthusiasm in the studio today with these four fantastic mums who all have something in common, and that is that they all have a child with Down syndrome. There's been a lot of laughter and tears during the break, and we've tried to contain it to share it with you. So, Steph, what were you saying in the break that we can now share with our listeners? You were talking with Meta up there.
It was interesting because when you introduced Meta and said that she came from Denmark and asked her about her experience, I expected her to say that, Denmark is amazing, and Denmark, this is what, she was hoping to, bring to inspire Dubai. I was actually hoping that in some ways, but actually hearing her say, 7 years on from when, all of this started. And it's not just me. Nisha can, I'm sure, has possibly even had a similar experience. But, to hear that people are coming now and having that positive experience. There's many people who have been making change in the UAE. And just by taking a stand, saying my child deserves to be in that classroom, to hear now that it's, to hear somebody new coming in to see that that's really a reality, it just makes me very, very happy.
And I think that's what moved everybody just while we took a break. It was that Steph, you were saying, look, I campaigned so hard. I did this 7 years ago. I did this for my child, but I also did this so that other families wouldn't have to experience this challenge. And I came to the UAE 2 years ago after having taught in the UK for, over 20 years, very much so with children with special needs. And I feel like now I'm a part of this journey as well. And you were just so excited that Metup's experience would be so different. Nisha, is there anything that you would add to what we've been talking about in the last few moments?
I would completely agree with Steph. When my son had to go into school, it was traumatic for me more than it was for him. I was looking for a school. I couldn't find one. I left work. I actually quit, and I decided I'm going to do this full time. And I actually hired an educational specialist, which cost an arm and a leg, to help me get me in front of the right people at the school, so I can have that discussion to say, look, I don't want to be ignored. My son needs to go to school. What can you do for me? And I had umpteen discussions, some of them at the best schools here, to say, sorry, we don't accept people like your child.
But you see, the more that children are accepted into mainstream school, and the more that teachers, other parents, other children accept this as normal, the quicker we can move on. And, I genuinely feel that we're on the cusp of something very exciting here in the UAE. I think there is a real drive, there is a real emphasis being placed on supporting families, with children of determination. And I think actually we could eventually be world leaders in exclusive education and the right way to treat people of determination. It's really exciting to be a part of it, and your story is particularly inspirational, Metap, that you've come here and you've experienced that. Now, over to you, Amal, at the Hope Centre. I know that you support children there who have Down syndrome. Can you tell us about some of the work that you do at Hope Centre?
Actually, at Hope, we try to bring things that are different. We don't want to be just another therapy center. So we looked at the gaps that, how do we bring in social communication rather than speech therapy? How do we bring on trainings that work on the brain for neurological disorders rather than work on the muscles, and bring them all together? And that has helped a lot of Down syndrome families in terms of communication, in terms of physical abilities, in terms of endurance. And because we also carry on the support group, we have helped the family and the sibling accept the reality, because that's when you start trying to do something about it and help your child in the most efficient way, versus when you're not ready to take it on board. And I've had one phone call a month ago from a parent who got my number to join the support group about a Down syndrome child.
And your support group, just to say that anyone listening at home who feels in need of support, is called Beautiful Mums, isn't it?
Yes.
And it's free, it's completely non-profit, making the only purposes about supporting other mums who have a child with an additional need. So Beautiful Mums.
Yes, and I received that call and she was speaking about her child who has Down syndrome. And the first question I would ask, how old is your child? And then she said, unborn. And then she completely lost it, burst into tears. It took us 4 or 5 months of support to get her to accept it. Funnily enough, when the child was born, he did not have Down syndrome. That was another trauma for her to re-accept it, because she was willing to embrace the journey, willing to accept the child, and then a lot of things happened. So the support is very, very important. And bringing in the right team, the right calibers that would work on the child, that's what we do at Hope. Look at the child for who he is, not for the diagnosis he has, for the potential he has, rather than for the obstacles or what he cannot achieve. And definitely they will amaze you.
Now, you have a lot of fun, though, at the Hope Centre, because, anybody listening at home, you need to follow these families because, recently I know my own daughter went down and she volunteered and there was football practice down there.
Yes.
So what kind of things do you do with the families there to kind of, give a bit of extra kind of fun to what might be quite a challenging time?
We do have workshops that speak about how to take care of yourself, well-being. We do have yoga. We did bring the football by Miss Autumn for the kids, and the kids wouldn't let her go. They would just pull her shorts. Please come back. Please come back. They want to do it. We had the special ones play with their siblings, with their coaches, with their trainers, and we bring on all the daily activities that the neurotypical children get to experience, because they are children at the end of the day.
Listen, I'm glad that you brought in the siblings, because I'd like to talk about them just after the break. So everybody at home, stay tuned, keep us company. 102 Pearl FM, the #1 fun station in the UAE. You're listening to Happy Families with Principal Lisa. We'll be right back.
When we have dinner, we sit down, everything's sort of in the middle of the table, and we make an effort to make conversation, talk about our day. We don't have our phones or, iPads or anything at the table. It's a really nice time, to come together and share your experiences of the day. And I'm going to instill that when I have children, because I think it's really important, and it really brought us together as a family.
Happy Families, coming soon, exclusively on 102 Pearl FM.
The #1 fun station in the UAE.
Hi, welcome back. Welcome to Happy Families with Principal Lisa. You're listening to Happy Families at 102 Pearl FM, the #1 fun station in the UAE. Thank you so much for joining us and keeping us company. I'm joined in the studio by 4 fantastic ladies, and if you've been listening, you'll know that each of these ladies has a story. Each of their children has Down syndrome, and we've been talking a lot about the impact, some of the challenges. But right now, I'd like us to explore how family life might be affected from a sibling's point of view. So Metap, I know that you have a little girl called Ella who's 3, but you also have another child. Talk to us about that.
Yes, so we have little Aya. She is 1.5. So another positive thing about UAE or about Dubai is that Aya, the fact that she actually goes to the same nursery as Ella, she actually don't she doesn't see the difference between Ella or anyone else at home, and that the same thing when she goes to nursery, because Aya actually don't see Ella as a big sis with special needs. So the fact that when Aya goes to the nursery and she can play with Ella on the same terms as she can with everyone else at the nursery, it's only positive, because it's also very important for Aya and for her life that her big sister is included in the society just like her. I don't want Aya to be affected by Ella's special needs, and that's also one thing that has been important for us and also one of the reasons why we moved to Dubai, is because when we asked for more support for Ella in Denmark, they said if you want more support, then we have to move Ella from a normal nursery to a special needs nursery, which means that Ella has to join kids with more difficult needs, and that will also, of course, have an impact on Aya, because then Aya
She's
is
not with her sister.
Exactly.
So it's like, well, this is your choice, Mum. Hey, great choice. You know, you either kind of put up with it, and actually she might not reach her learning development goals because no one's differentiating the work, no one's making changes so she can access it, or you make that very hard choice to put her into an environment where only children with challenge spend their days, and she loses her connection with her sibling. And you know, your little girls, you know, are with me in the nursery each day, and they seek each other out. They love to play with each other in the garden, you know, and that's a really special thing. You know, I went to school with my siblings. You know, I think that's a pretty standard thing as well. And I mean, you know, Steph, you know, so you've got Ruby. He's almost 13. Do you have other children as well?
Yes, I do. I have 2 other girls. One who is 17, about to go to university next year, and another daughter who's 9, nearly 10.
So Ruby's in the middle.
Ruby's in the middle. So
okay.
Yeah. So it's interesting because one comment I get on my eldest daughter a lot is that people think she's in her 20s because of her maturity level. And I feel like that is a direct result. She was 5 when Ruby was born. And I feel she was a pretty, you know, she's a pretty level-headed little soul anyway at the time. But I feel like that definitely gave her additional responsibilities, perhaps. Yeah. So, I mean, and it also helped her to understand. I mean, it was interesting. We never said anything about her having Down syndrome. And it wasn't until she was maybe 3 or 4, so Olivia would have been 8 or 9, and she one day said, how come she doesn't speak as clearly as the other kids? So it took a few years for her to actually, and the kids around her, and we just never said anything to her about it. The younger sibling, that's also been a positive experience, but now as they're growing older, one thing I would say is, as we face different challenges with Ruby going through this time, that the biggest challenge right now is to maintain those 3 separate relationships. You know, in order for us not to be caught up in Ruby all the time, and that is very difficult.
Why is that? So, you know, families listening to that, you've said that you really want to keep the children as individuals, and you really feel that that's important, and you've talked about that being difficult. Why do you perceive it as difficult, perhaps?
Well, it's a matter of just plain simple time and energy, to be honest. You know, Ruby has different needs on top of Down syndrome as well. We're just going through some other challenges with her, and you know, and it can be very, very energy and time consuming, to be honest. You know, and particularly going through this phase in her life, teenagers, I think most of us can agree, can be a very challenging time. We'll add on, you know, Down syndrome and other needs on top of that. You know, it's a matter of being able to go, okay, you're 17, you've got this, you're doing your homework, you're good, and you can handle yourself as well, you're 9. But actually, those 2 other kids need our attention as well. And I really, you know, I do my best, but I must admit that through this last year, it's been an incredibly big challenge for me personally, and I'm not going to make any candy coat that in any way, because it is incredibly difficult, and it's a very conscious effort to
everybody, we're all agreeing with you. And I think that I often, in children that I've worked with who have a sibling with an additional need, is that one of the biggest things I hear them say is, why is she allowed to do that? How come she's okay to do that? Why is that? And there is that, what about me? You know, would you Nisha, would you say that that's something you would relate to?
Yes, definitely. My daughter is 5 years old, and my son is 8. And when you look at them, because my son is short, they almost look the same age. Okay. So they used to get mistaken for twins. but they're not at all. And my son is allowed to take certain things into school, whereas she's not, And I have to try and explain it to her. And to a 5-year-old, nothing is going to make sense, So it's really difficult. And as Steph said, that dividing your time is really difficult. And there are some behaviours now that are coming through at school that my daughter's now displaying, which luckily, it's a young age, so I'm still able to do something about it. So I've highlighted it at the school, and we're going to work on that together. So you do need support. You can't always get it right, although you try your best to balance everything. There's always going to be a time when your child with special needs is going to need other things like therapy or a little bit more coaching or just a bit of downtime with me. So yeah, I do have to be conscious of the fact that I spend enough time, equal time, with the children.
And so I'm a mother of 3, and actually, interestingly, and I'll share it with you, I was expecting a 4th child who had Down syndrome, and I lost her, and that was the 4th child that was going to be in our family. So it's something that I have a special connection with, and I've always really enjoyed working with families with Down syndrome. But even as a mother of 3 children who don't present in the same way as your children with Down syndrome, I always felt guilty. I always felt like one of my children would be kind of getting it right and they were all on track, and I'd think, oh, thank goodness. And then just as I'd get one on track, one of the other ones would pipe up and there'd be a new, and that there would be a new challenge, family life. Come on, ladies, family life is challenging. And as mums, don't we all feel guilty, quite a lot of the time. But and so we're here as 5 ladies chatting today. What about the dads in here? Yeah, shall we mention dads?
If it's not the kids, then it's the dads.
Do we have
to? Okay, let's talk about the experiences for dads. Who'd like to share a story that brings dad into this equation today?
So, not to brag about my dear husband, but he has been the most amazing man ever when it comes to accepting Ella. I had a tough time when Ella was born. I had a tough time by accepting her Down syndrome because I couldn't see anything. That was the weird part of it. However, he was like, she's a little angel, and we would just treat her as she was anyone else or just a normal kid, and that's not going to change anything. So he was my rock and my biggest support ever. And the way he loves Ella and the way he plays with her, for me, I must say, he has been my biggest supporter ever. So only positive words.
Yes. And, I know your husband, and he just is, there are so many dads I know that I could nominate for kind of, dad in the year. Steph, is there anything that you would add? I know that your husband has a support group. Can you tell us about that, please?
I believe they have a support group called Dubai Dads.
What do they get up to?
I probably don't want to know. I believe that was started a few years ago, and it was mainly the idea of getting the dads together, to just be able to not, and it's not even necessarily to get together to talk about Down syndrome or whatever. It's mainly just to get together and have that kindred spirit, sort of kinship together. So they go out, for a drink or, I'm not sure what else they've got up to, but basically the idea was let's come together because I think, and this comes across all of society. Even we talk about mental health, it's easier. I think women just naturally gravitate, to their groups of friends. I do believe it's easier for us to connect with each other, just the way that we've been brought up as women and men. And I think for men, I can only, talk about my husband's experience. I think it was, although he accepted, just like, Meta said her husband was, he always accepted from the beginning. But I also feel that there was something always brewing there that he couldn't discuss. And definitely, I believe it's harder for them to do that. Maybe I can't speak for all men. I can't make a blanket statement, but would everyone else?
But do you feel it's right for them to have a space in which it's just for them?
Yeah, I think just like, we would. And I think that there's certain things that men can, that...
And how many dads are in the group?
I'm not sure now. But
quite a few.
But quite a few, I think, yeah. And I think, to be honest with you, my husband started it. I don't actually know how many times he's actually attended himself. But,
But so if dads were listening and they wanted to join that group, how would they find that group?
I think...
Not sure. This is a very good point for us to take a break. What we're gonna do is I think we'll take a break, everybody, and we'll come back, and then we want to share some kind of information and tips so that we close the show today with something that, if anyone listening at home, wants to take part in or find some information from. So keep it at 102 Pearl FM. This is Happy Families with Principal Lisa. This is the #1 fun station in the UAE. Just tell us, so what time are you getting up now?
So I get up at 4:30 every day. So 4:45 I go out. I walk for 2.5, 3 Ks every morning. As I mentioned, my wife's a teacher, so she leaves early. So by the time I'm back, we sort of cross over, then get the lunches ready, I get the school bags ready, I get the kids up, and I'm in the car by 6:30. I'm by no means a superstar. There's hundreds of parents around Dubai that are doing...
Well done, Sam.
Happy Families, coming soon, exclusively on 102 Pearl FM.
The #1 fun station in the UAE.
Hi, welcome back to the show. You're listening to Happy Families with Principal Lisa at 102 Pearl FM, the #1 fun station in the UAE. Thanks for listening to the show today. As we close the show, we've been joined by 4 fantastic ladies who've bared all. We've laughed, we've cried during the show today. It's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you to Amal, Metap, Nisha and to Steph for joining us. All of these ladies have children with Down syndrome and we've shared lots of stories today. But as we come to the end of the show, we want to share some tips and advice to families who might need it. And we've been talking a lot about what's available to you if you do have a child with Down syndrome. So Steph, can you tell us about some of the work that you're doing so that we can support people at home?
So the project that I started a few years ago called I Am Me, I'm just starting it up again as we're approaching the Special Olympics. So basically the idea is to, I like to say mainstream beauty and difference. So it's just to make it, to show, we talk about what is the condition that this person has. Because at the end of the day, I think sometimes people are like, what's going on with that person? So it's okay to talk about Down syndrome, cerebral. It's not like we need to be quiet about these things. We need to educate people. What is it? What is cerebral palsy? What is Down syndrome? So we talk a bit about what is the condition. Then we talk about the gifts and the challenges. So the whole idea of the concept of the project is that we all have gifts and we all have challenges. Every single one of us here. And it's being able to find that as a common thread to show that their challenges, so you might ask them, what is your challenge? They might actually tell you that they have trouble finding parking, don't always assume that their challenges are completely, of course they have challenges. I mean, I'm making light of that situation, but what are the challenges they face? But what are their gifts? And that's the thing I really want to focus on. What are their gifts? What makes them unique? What do they bring to the world? Because like you said before, we focus a lot, and schools tend to focus on what we need to fix or what needs to get better. But what about what's already great? And what about what's already phenomenal?
And so your work, I Am Me, is it?
Yes,
So
yes.
I Am Me, that's on Instagram. So that kind of celebrates the difference, but also the similarities of all of us and kind of it gives a platform for that.
Yeah, it gives a platform to educate. So that, it's educating, advocating for, things that we're moving towards more equality in certain areas. And also just showing that, we're all beautiful in some way. And I think the one thing I've learned about my daughter is that she just accepts who she is. It's not her that has the issue accepting herself. It is the people out there in the world, including myself, including that's been a journey for all of us. And it's, sometimes I've had to look and go, well, wait a minute, why am I looking at this differently? I should just look at it as her. It just is what it is, you know?
Okay. And the other things we've been talking about was support for dads. And in the break, you gave your husband a call, and he wasn't keen on having his mobile number given out. But what he wanted to say, I think, is that there is support for dads, and it's called Dubai Dads. And you can find that on Facebook.
I think you can. And if you can't, you can go on Instagram at I am me Dubai is the Instagram name. You can private message me and I will link.
We've also talked about Dubai Syndrome Dubai, the Candid Family Support Group, and also the Beautiful Mums Group. Is there anything else that perhaps we could share with families about what kind of support that there is? You mentioned the Rashid Centre, Nisha, earlier on. Is there anything that you would add about your time at the Rashid Centre?
Okay, Rashid Centre, we came across children with all kinds of conditions and syndromes, and that was inspiring in itself. And that's when I realised that there is a spectrum of abilities within Down syndrome itself, and that to me was actually an eye-opener. And at that point I realised actually it can be so worse, and I'm in such a good place, so I have nothing to complain about, just get on with it. But to look at my child as an individual and not as a condition is the number one tip. And then 2 is just give your child what he needs. Usually they tell you what they want anyway. They might not be able to communicate, like maybe talk to you, but they can tell you in other ways. And so just feel it, because we're connected, and you can. So this is something that I've learned, and this is after my daughter was born. So my son was already a good few years old. So it's something that comes, it's something that you have to learn, that, you know, the diagnosis doesn't mean anything, just treat the child as an individual.
And so is that what you would say that you'd like people to know? So Meta, is there anything, so if I said to you, what do you wish that people knew, who might say, do you know what, I'd quite like to know a bit more about Down syndrome, what would you say?
I don't know, but what I want to say is that for me, Ella has been my biggest coach in life. I thought I knew a lot. I thought I appreciated life. I thought I had everything, and then Ella turned up, and she has taught me so much about life, about people, about family in general, and I could not, thank her enough for what she had taught me. And I think sometimes people, I'm not blaming anyone because I was in the same situation, people are actually very scared when we talk about kids with special needs, but actually it's not that bad. I know it sounds very, very weird, strange to say this, but you just grow with the task, or with anything else. And I just thank God every day for having Ella in my life.
And it's a bit like what we started at the beginning of the show, and I talked about this fantastic girl that shares her videos, and I was showing it to teachers about how she just said, it's just an extra chromosome.
That's what it is.
It is that children or any adult with Down syndrome has 47 chromosomes instead of 46.
Exactly.
It's just one of those things. And in fact, I was researching before the show, and I was finding out that 1 in every 320 births in the UAE may result in a child having Down syndrome. So the more awareness and the more kind of acceptance and kind of can-do approach can only be better for children. What would you say, Amal, about that attitude towards understanding?
I think awareness is key. I'd love when people approach me and ask about the condition, because that's the only way they would know. I love that in the nursery, Dara's friends were treating her and approaching her and treating her like one of them, because that's the only way they would learn that there is such a thing as extra needs or challenges. And those children are children, but they do present differently. And awareness is key. Like, we need to promote awareness for other people to give us the reaction we expect when they see our children. Just give us the smile or approach or acknowledge them, rather than look away or act in an awkward manner.
And I think the more and more that children are exposed to different types of ability, the better. And I know that my personal experience always tells me that creates within other children who don't have a special need a really strong sense of empathy and teamwork and community. You know, when the children are nursery line up at the running track to participate in a race, that they do go back to help their friend, you know, come forward. They cheer each other on, you know, and there are children in that race who are able-bodied, and there are children there that are participating in that activity by having a wheelchair, and you know, and they're pushing their friends along. This can only be, you know, a really, really special thing. I just want to say thank you so much to you ladies for coming along. It's been a really great hour, and I'm really grateful to the families and to the listeners at home for supporting us today and tuning in. So I just want to say a big thank you to you all at home. Thank you for listening to Happy Families with Principal Lisa. You've been listening to 102 Pearl FM, the #1 fun station in the UAE.
When we have dinner, we sit down, everything's sort of in the middle of the table, and we make an effort to make conversation, talk about our day. We don't have our phones or, you know, iPads or anything at the table. You know, it's a really nice time, you know, to come together and share your experiences of the day. And I'm going to instill that when I have children, because I think it's really important, and it really brought us together as a family.
Happy Families, coming soon, exclusively on 102 Pearl FM.
The #1 fun station in the UAE.